Hello and welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet for me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hi, Brandon,
Hey, Brandon.
and welcome to Season 7. We're going over Matthew again.
I
Yeah, it feels a little
just love it
crazy.
so much.
Yeah, just why can't I quit you? Uh, why can't I quit you, Matthew? Yeah, so I'm so glad we're back. It felt like the second half of 2024 was like we intended to take the summer off, but life just kept conspiring to make it really friggin' difficult for us to get into a rhythm of recording. But here we are. Brandon, you're my New Year's resolution.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna make this happen. We're gonna get this season going. If you didn't listen to the little teaser we put out in January, um, yeah, here's why we're doing Matthew. Something horrible happened in November in America, and we've been doing some soul searching about what matters and what in the Christian scriptures has come into fierce focus for us. And you were polishing your translation of Matthew at the time, and it felt like, hmm, this slaps in a new way.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like, oh, this is relevant in ways that I just didn't have ears to hear before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. This is a book written by people under occupation in an imperial or authoritarian context for people in an imperial or authoritarian or occupied context. And it's about
Mhm.
stories overwhelmingly of folks in an imperial, authoritarian, or occupied context. So we shouldn't be surprised that when an authoritarian is elected in the United States, that things kind of come into focus.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's why we're going to be reviewing Matthew. Less of a focus on, the first time around we talk, and in previous seasons, we take time to talk about this through the lens of your translation work,
Right.
and through the lens of, religious technical jargon
Hmm.
and other just kind of cringy word choices. But more and more as we were doing these seasons, we've begun to focus more and more on liberation themes and still including those others. But now we're really just
Yeah,
going to focus on that as we go through Matthew this
yeah,
time.
yeah. And specific translation choices will be relevant, but yeah, we're not like going through and finding everything I've changed. It's what is highlighting this liberatory uh, message that we're seeing with new
Yeah.
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of those there are consequential translation changes that you do make. Like, okay, instead of angels, it's messengers. Not super consequential
Right. Right.
to this uh, to the times that we find ourselves in. So we're not going to get into that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about Matthew. What do you think is helpful for people to understand about this gospel?
Yeah. I mean, it really is about Jesus showing up for marginalized folks. Like that is the theme. Um, it's for, by, with the people who are left out, forgotten, disregarded.
Yes.
And Jesus consistently is saying those people who are being hurt by the way things are, by the status quo, by the systems in place, by the power structures in place,
Hmm.
those are the ones who are my focus. And taking care of and including them is the heart of all of Hebrew and Christian scriptures.
Yeah.
Uh, at that point just Hebrew scriptures for
Yeah,
Jesus. But
sure. Uh,
you know,
yeah, the people who are caught up in the imperial game, who are um, being ground up for profit, for the grain they can produce, the gold they can hand over, and all the different ways that we bargain, that we negotiate living under empire.
mhm,
That's another component of this. The Josephus, the first century historian, identifies these four kind of categories of ways that the Hebrew people were responding to their occupied lives of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and the Essenes.
Essenes.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are effectively four different ways of coping with the dissonance between being promised that things are going to be okay if you follow this God and the fact that there's uh, uh, the jackboots are coming after us.
Mhm.
They're trying to solve that kind of theodicy, that political lived theodicy. Um, and sorry, my dog is honking at me through the door, and I cannot focus. Let me let him in.
Okay.
Uh, let's see. I'm gonna go like this so I can see it where to edit and delete this. There we go. Hey, dude. Hop up. Hey. Yeah. Hi. You okay? Anxious little buddy.
Mhm.
Hey, get in your spot. Good boy. Good settle. That's a great place for you to be. Okay, I was talking about the four different ways of being. Where was I supposed to be going with that? You can come in with a non sequitur to keep it going. Oh crap, our brains broke.
Yeah, I mean, I guess justice and mercy.
Yeah,
The fact that like multiple times he does things like the golden rule and 23:23, the weightier matters of justice, mercy, and faithfulness, uh, the two greatest commandments, like multiple times in Matthew. It's like the Hebrew Bible, this is it. Like love each other, right?
yeah,
It doesn't say it as directly as in John, but
yeah. But that's clearly the path. And
mm,
Christ spending time, like Christ is the fifth of Josephus's lists, really, of ways of Hebrews managing occupation. Um, and so many of these stories are, and the stories that Jesus himself tells and the teachings he gives
mm,
are like, I'm thinking of it now as strategies for how to live liberation together
mm,
amidst authoritarianism.
right.
They're not trying to, like the Pharisees weren't trying to earn their salvation. They were trying to um, coerce liberation through a weird kind of purity, cultural purity, because they thought that would help force God's hand to get rid of the imperialists.
Yeah, I mean,
But
they
they
were
were,
trying really hard to be faithful, remembering
yeah,
Torah and like, yeah, occupation, exile. Those are the things you can expect if you're not being faithful to what God has called you to be faithful to.
yeah,
And so they're like, well, we don't want that again. So we're going to be real careful about
yeah,
following every rule.
yeah. Missing the fact that there. the fundamental dominationist and supremacist logic of authoritarianism got in their blood as they were trying to figure out how to be
Mhm.
faithful. Like it
Yeah,
still crept in.
right.
And so Christ is doing this love-centered way.
Hmm. Which he didn't like imagine up out of thin air. He wasn't the only one teaching this kind of thing.
No. Yeah.
In fact, a lot of Pharisees were teaching that like Pharisees are not the bad guys,
No, they're
right?
not.
Like,
No.
um, but there are, especially if you get once you get into the Sanhedrin, the ones with more political power in particular. Uh, Power corrupts, man. Like
Hmm.
it's just how it
Hmm.
works.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but yeah, one thing that I've heard said is that everything Jesus says in the Gospels you can find in other Jewish writings of the time, with one exception, and that's the love your enemies.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, that's the scandalous um, plunge forward in human consciousness that that he brought.
Mhm.
Um, so in terms of like the content of Matthew and the structure, um, the contents, so if you're new to the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the three Gospels we call the synoptics. They sound alike because they share an incredible amount of content together. But Matthew and Luke have stuff that Mark doesn't have, and they each have things that are different from one another. So there is this like,
Mhm.
there's content in Matthew that is unique to Matthew. There's also the
Mhm.
voice of these authors, there's also the way that they organize these stories. It's not
Yeah.
trying necessarily outside of Luke to even claim that this is a chronological sequence of what happened. It's a
Mhm.
theological way of telling what happened. Um,
Right.
but what are some of those like things that are unique to Matthew? The Sermon on the Mount comes to mind.
Yeah, Sermon on the Mount is unique. There are snippets of it that are in Luke, um,
Yeah.
as well, but it's not nearly as filled out as the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew.
Hmm.
Um, the Olivet Discourse, which is kind of the counterpart to the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount being speaking to the people directly,
Hmm.
encouraging them, versus the Olivet Discourse is more like critiquing those in power, uh,
Yeah.
and they're kind of the parallel passages.
To the
Um,
people at the top of the pyramid. Yeah. Oh, so I'm thinking of some
right.
metaphor of Sermon on the Mount. He's on the Mount. Now he's talking to the people at the top of the pyramid. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Doing good Pauline mixing metaphors there. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah. Keep your lamp
yeah.
lit because a thief is going to come and take the bridegroom and she's a virgin. It's like, thanks, Paul. All
Yeah,
over the place there, brother. Uh, yeah. And the,
yeah.
and the,
Lots of
all
parables,
yeah.
lots of teaching in Matthew.
Hmm.
The others all have teaching too, but Matthew is like heavy on the teaching focus.
Heavy on the teaching, which has led some people to really see Matthew as like having a particular resonance with, um, the Torah, with the Jewish
Hmm.
teachings, kind of at a literary level. Like this is
Yeah.
the new Torah or something to that effect.
Hmm. Which I think there's something there. There's definitely some parallels going into Egypt and coming back out, and the Sermon on the Mount could be the parallel to Moses teaching from Sinai, like all of those things. Um, People go as far as to break it into five sections to match the five books of Torah, which Brandon and you were and I were talking about. Like, we don't actually see it. Like, you can
Yeah.
break it into five sections, but we don't see parallels to the specific books of Torah in those five sections.
Yeah. Something broken into five pieces is not suddenly magically Torah resonant. Like,
Right,
sorry.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But in terms of the structure, you've got your own way of like proposing how it's shaped.
yeah, I don't know if I can share screen or not here, but yeah, I can. Woohoo!
Do it.
I'll show for those of you who can see this. Otherwise, you can. check it out on your own at litbible.net/Matthew-intro. Um, it has what I'm seeing as what's called a chiastic structure, named after the Greek letter chi because it's kind of shaped like it. But basically, there's parallel passages. The beginning and the end are parallel, and then you go to chapter 2, and the second to last are parallel, and so on and so forth until you get to this central section
Mm-hmm.
that becomes like this central pivotal section is key to unlocking the point of the whole thing.
Okay, before we get there, can you
Mm-hmm.
give us a few examples of how is 3 and 4 like 26 or
Yeah,
5 through 7 like 23 through
sure.
25?
Yeah, well, 1 and 28 is easy. There's like direct quotations that are shared.
Okay.
Um, and it's about the like the beginning of it is this genealogy that introduces the story up to Jesus, and then you have the Great Commission in 28 that's like, and the story is going to continue after Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the Lord's messenger shows up in both of them, giving messages to people. Chapter 2 and 27. Chapter 2 is where Herod goes berserk and kills a bunch of babies.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 27 is where Pilate kills Jesus or
Mm-hmm.
orders his death, right? So they got that parallel. Um, I won't go through every single one of them here, but 5 through 7 is the Sermon on the Mount. 23 through 25 is the Olivet Discourse that we've already mentioned as being those parallel passages.
Yeah.
Um, uh, all the way to like the second closest to the central here, you have in 14, you have the feeding of the 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second half of 15 and 16, you've got the feeding of the 4,000. Um, so it's zeroing in. Each one of these has this parallel themes that are
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah. And they can mute the idea is that they can inform one another in some ways, but they're also meant to help guide you with like, okay,
Mhm.
where did you find that fulcrum point? And you have
Yeah,
found it to be this story in the first half of 15.
yeah. It's yeah, the first half of 15, and it's kind of there's this little bit of teaching that Jesus does, followed by a story of how Jesus is living it out.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's this story about Jesus talking about what goes into you doesn't make you unclean, is what comes out of you. Um, value me with your lips, talking about everything that goes into the mouth proceeds into the belly and is expelled into the toilet. Right? What emerges from comes from the heart. These make a person unclean. And then it gives a list of expressions of that. So it's really not about are you following the specific rules about what you eat, what you know,
Mm,
what mixing your clothes, fabrics, right? Like all these things that are found in Torah. The point of what is clean or unclean and how Jesus and the New Testament really are defining clean is living aligned with the calling to be sacred, living aligned with the purposes of representing
yes.
God to those around you. Um, and so if you're clean, you are ready to do that. You're prepared to do that. If you're unclean, it's not necessarily evil or bad or wrong always. Sometimes just it's not the right time. If you're, you know, if you're sick or you've got someone you knew died and you touch their body, like it's not the right time, right? But it's about how you treat people. Treating
Hmm.
people well is what it means to be clean. Treating people poorly is unclean. And then it gets this story that has really, really baffled people. Um, we can go into it in more detail once we get to this chapter, but it's the Canaanite woman where it seems like Jesus is being really rude, but there's really all this cultural and linguistic and textual context. The
Like
point
he seems
is
like
that
he's being
he
racist. Like, let's be clear, and
basically,
and
yeah,
sexist at
yeah,
some level. Yeah.
yeah. And but what it is he is giving her this interaction that is treating her like a student, really. It's like getting her to tease out these ideas, including her in God's reign, in the kingdom
Mm.
of heaven, however you want to phrase this, in this way that the disciples weren't getting at all. They're trying to get her to leave him alone, right? And instead, he includes her. And that's, we'll get into why I see it as being that later. But this is the central passage, the sense of the point of the scriptures is to treat each other well, to include everyone, including a foreigner, including a woman, including all these things that seem unclean, but it's actually excluding this woman that would be unclean. And including her makes you clean.
Uh,
And that's the point of basically all of Matthew is the sense of treating people well, loving your neighbor, uh, including the people who have been routinely excluded. That's what restores full participation in the calling to follow Christ, to follow Torah, to follow God.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like the stone the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. Like fold that in,
Mm-hmm.
bring it in. And what's the word we just saw? Not eucatastrophe, eucontamination, EU
Mm-hmm.
contamination.
Good
Um,
contamination.
yeah, contamination of the good. Like let in
Yeah.
what you're afraid of, and it'll bring a new wholeness. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's fascinating to see that right there. Like the chiastic structure you're showing throughout the rest of the this piece of literature seems pretty clear as you've parsed it out. I would have never have guessed that this would be the narrative hinge point,
Mm-hmm.
let alone the chiastic pivot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really, I'm moved by this explanation for it. So,
Yeah. And as far as like, how does this relate to what we were talking about of liberation in the context of oppression? Is the Jesus way is not to overthrow the oppressors, to use the oppressors' strategies against them. It's be so intentional about taking care of the people that the oppressors are harming that it takes away their power to harm. Be so intentional about speaking well of, treating and proclaiming the value of the people that are thought to be worthless, that it completely flips the narrative upside down. Like
mm-hmm.
this, that's how you do true liberation, true restoration.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm excited for us to, I think, be turning back to this theme as we work our way through this gospel. Um, what else is going to be helpful for folks to know here as we prepare to start marching through Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, just be looking constantly for this sense of, yeah, I got to read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, um, part of what the inspiration for this season was is us talking about like maybe we want to be careful what kind of things we put into the public sphere onto the internet about who we're critiquing, um, and
Mm-hmm.
saying maybe not being as overt in our criticism of things,
Yeah.
but rather kind of a wink and a nod if we need to, and really focusing instead on the like, who are we valuing? Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and things like phrases like "let the reader understand" are a signal of like, there was something that I want you to catch, but I didn't say it directly.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. Same thing. Like, are you catching what I'm saying here, even though I'm not saying it explicitly? Um, Talking about speaking in parables so that some people would be ever hearing but never understanding, or whatever the wording is.
Hmm.
Um, because he's trying to get points across without explicitly critiquing those in power. Um,
Yeah.
Wants you to know what he thinks about him without, but with some deniability,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or like they all kind of like cock their head at the same time and he slips away,
Uh
the
huh.
wily one.
They're like,
Yeah.
wait, what did he just imply? And but he's
Yeah.
gone, right? And
We talk about this literature category called apocalyptic. Um,
mhm,
Big chunks of, if not the entirety of Daniel in the Hebrew scriptures, um, Book of Revelation are examples
mhm,
of apocalyptic literature where it is veiled, it is coded, it is, apocalypsis meaning, unveiling. Like you have to kind of pick at the peel to get at the meaning of this stuff.
right,
And and they will talk about, scholars will talk about in Matthew how parts of that Olivet discourse where it's talking about kind of the conventional reading is the end times, the end of the world. It was about the end of the world as they knew it. It's about, look, if you
mhm,
confront Rome on Rome's terms, shit's going to collapse on you and it's going to get bad.
yeah.
Um,
Rome's real good at
yeah,
force.
yeah, it painting the roads with blood. They are very
Mhm,
effective at that. And so yeah, he's using coded language there to talk about, really to theologize as much as
mhm,
to speak in um kind of creative misdirection a little bit. Like he's
mhm,
he's mythologizing what he's talking about with the future. But
right,
don't leave the apocalyptic um discretion and creativity
right.
there as a literary type. Also see it in so much of what Christ is doing. He's
Mhm,
embodying a way of being. He is saying, he's telling stories. Yeah, all these things where he kind of winks with, let those who have ears to hear,
right,
and eyes to see. These are all ways of saying, I'm kind of enacting an apocalyptic vibe
right,
here.
right.
Uh,
Yeah, and telling people, don't tell anyone what I did for you, right? That's the point, is to protect him, but also the people that he's helping. Like, if they
yes.
start going around and saying Jesus is better than you to the people in power, it's they're going to be punished, and he doesn't want that for them.
No, he doesn't.
And he's trying to be cryptic because he's not ready to die yet.
Hmm.
He starts getting real explicit, like in the triumphal entry when he comes into the temple and flips over tables. He That's why he knows that he's going to die, is because he knows that he's going to go confront them in a big way.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that until he knew that it was time, that he was ready for that to be the consequence.
Hmm. Like, yeah, yeah, he pulled the lever on that one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's a trip to think through how many seminary classes and like intros to the Gospels that I was like assigned in seminary that, we're like, why does he speak this way? Oh, he's hiding the spiritual meaning. And like, there were all these like fundamentally disincarnate ways of asking the question of why did Jesus speak in parables?
Hmm.
And they brought some kinds of insight in their own way. But man, the plain reading of it in history, take these stories as intended to be read as corresponding somewhat to history. Like, well, people under authoritarian regimes where there are snitches and there are crowds who seem quite ready to take up swords and go fight the people with more swords and better
Mm-hmm.
armor. If you say the wrong thing, like if you say it's not just about avoiding the wrath of Herod and Caesar. It's about challenging the crowd for a different way of being countercultural than go get yourself killed for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
not the goal, sisters and brothers.
No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like we alluded to earlier, us being men and white and
Hmm.
cisgender and heterosexual, like in America, much like the seminary professors were talking about, like had no reason to notice
Hmm.
this like careful doublespeak because
Mm.
of being marginalized.
Yeah.
Um, it just didn't make sense. There was no there was no hook to hang that thought on for those of us who are privileged.
Hmm.
Um, but being so in tune with the suffering that we're seeing and hearing from those who are really scared right now brought it into focus for us in a new way here.
Yeah.
Um, so where like the pivotal moment is like we need to do Matthew again is when it occurred to me that when he's talking about by their fruit you shall know them, it never occurred to me before to ask
Oh.
why are we trying to figure that out? Like, so what? What does it matter to know who's who, who's in, who's out, who's part of? And it's because you want to know who's going to support you and take care of you, and who is going to oppress you and uh, uh, retaliate against you
Yeah.
for speaking the truth. And be careful and know who to be careful with and who to actually trust.
Yeah.
And that's not something I've really had to think about very much before.
Hmm. What a time to be alive. There is nothing new under the sun. How
Right.
profound it is that um, this tragically normal part of human existence is the context of the most famous stories in the world. And we've done everything we can to not read them as that. But
Mm-hmm.
they are, and they're way damn better when you
Yeah.
admit it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing over the first half of this year, roughly. And we're going to have a lot more co-hosts and guests joining us this season. Just before we recorded this, we were lining up all the folks we have invited and are going to invite, and I am so excited for this. So, um, it's worth noting here before we wrap up that you can go to litbible.net/Matthew or Matthew-intro to start reading through Brandon's translation. Uh, yeah, it's all up there and it has lots of footnotes at every chapter. So many footnotes. So that does it. Um, Thank you, as always, for joining us on this leg of the journey. The easiest way to support Founding Translation is to leave us a rating or review. 5 stars would be great on whatever app or player you've been enjoying this on, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts in particular. Those really help tell the algorithms to point more people at the show and the right people at the show. You can find us on Facebook as Founding Translation. You could read the Liberation and Inclusion Translation at www.litbible.net. That's litbible.net. And follow the developments on threads at lit. At lit.bible. That's hard to say. You can follow Brandon Johnson on Threads as at Old Song New Dance, and read more of his work at oldsongnewdance.com. You can follow me on Threads as at BDRHODES, BD Rhodes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced on unceded Chinook and Kalapuya land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, everybody.